The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the town, an eerie symphony of long-forgotten whispers and sighs. I stood at the edge of the desolation, peering into the heart of darkness that was once known as Blackwood. It had been a thriving mining community in the late 1800s, but now it was nothing more than a ghost town. As I stepped cautiously onto the cracked and weed-infested main street, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. The buildings loomed like ancient sentinels, their windows empty eye sockets staring into the abyss. I had heard tales of Blackwood all my life, stories of disappearances, hauntings, and unnatural occurrences that had plagued this forsaken place. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows that danced menacingly across the decaying facades. I had come here seeking answers, seeking the truth about Blackwood. I was a journalist, known for my fearless pursuit of the unknown, but even I couldn't deny the gnawing unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. My footsteps echoed through the empty streets, a sound that felt entirely too loud in this forsaken place. I had spent weeks researching the history of Blackwood, but the truth remained elusive. The official story was that the town had been abandoned due to the depletion of its coal mines, but the locals whispered of something far more sinister. I approached the first building on my journey, an old saloon with its doors hanging open like a hungry maw, waiting to swallow me whole. The air inside was heavy with dust and the acrid smell of decay. Broken chairs lay strewn about, and an ancient piano sat in the corner, its keys covered in a thick layer of grime. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of not being alone in that desolate place. Every creak and groan of the building seemed to echo with a malevolent presence. I took out my flashlight and shone it around the room, revealing old bottles of whiskey and playing cards still scattered on the tables as if the patrons had just vanished. I moved deeper into the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't resist the urge to call out to see if anyone or anything would answer. "Is anyone here?" I said, my voice trembling. There was only silence in response. As I continued to explore, I heard a faint whisper, like a distant murmur of voices. It was barely audible, but it sent shivers down my spine. I followed the sound, which seemed to lead me deeper into the bowels of the saloon. The further I went, the stronger the whispers became, until they seemed to surround me like a chorus of the damned. I reached a narrow hallway, and the whispers grew louder. I could almost make out words now, words that chilled me to the bone. "Stay away," they hissed. "Leave now, while you still can." But I couldn't turn back. I had come too far, and my curiosity burned brighter than my fear. I pushed open a creaking door at the end of the hallway, revealing a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room stood a mirror, its glass dark and cracked, but still reflective. I approached the mirror, my heart racing. My own reflection stared back at me, but something was off. My reflection's eyes were empty, soulless, and they seemed to be beckoning me closer. I couldn't tear my gaze away, even as the room grew colder and the whispers grew louder. Suddenly, the mirror shattered with a deafening crash, and I stumbled back, shards of glass raining down around me. I felt a searing pain in my hand and looked down to see blood oozing from a deep cut. Panic welled up inside me as I realized I was not alone in the room. Standing in the corner was a figure, shrouded in darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with long, bony fingers that reached out towards me. Its face was obscured, hidden by a tattered hood, but its eyes glowed with an otherworldly malevolence. I scrambled to my feet, my hand throbbing with pain, and fled from the room, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I stumbled out of the saloon and back onto Main Street, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The once silent town now seemed alive with sinister energy. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and I could hear faint, ghostly laughter drifting on the wind. I knew I had to leave, to escape this place, but it was as if the very town itself conspired to keep me trapped. I continued down the street, my footsteps quickening as I passed more abandoned buildings, each one seeming to hold its own dark secrets. The town had a malevolent presence, a hunger that could not be sated. As night fell, the darkness closed in around me, and I could no longer see the path ahead. I fumbled for my flashlight, but when I turned it on, the beam revealed a horrifying sight. The buildings around me had transformed into grotesque, nightmarish shapes, their windows glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, and tried to retrace my steps, but the town had shifted and changed, as if mocking my attempts to escape. Panic gnawed at the edges of my sanity as I realized I was hopelessly lost in this cursed place. I heard laughter again, louder this time, and I turned to see figures emerging from the shadows. They were the townspeople of Blackwood, their faces twisted and contorted into grotesque masks of agony. They moved towards me with slow, deliberate steps, their eyes fixed on me with a hunger that sent terror coursing through my veins. I ran, my footsteps echoing through the nightmare streets, but the town seemed to stretch on endlessly. It was as if Blackwood itself was alive, a malevolent entity that reveled in my fear and suffering. Finally, I stumbled upon a small chapel, its doors thrown open in a silent invitation. Desperation overcame me, and I rushed inside, slamming the doors shut behind me. The chapel was dimly lit by flickering candles, and the air was heavy with incense. I fell to my knees before the altar, my breath ragged, and begged for mercy from whatever malevolent force held this town in its grip. But there was no answer, only the distant echoes of the townspeople outside, their whispers growing louder and more menacing. I knew I couldn't stay in the chapel forever. The townspeople were relentless, and the town itself seemed determined to keep me as its prisoner. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and called for help, praying that someone, anyone, would hear my desperate pleas. Hours passed, and the whispers outside grew louder, more insistent. I huddled in the corner of the chapel, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. The townspeople outside let out a collective, mournful howl, and then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished into the darkness. The oppressive malevolence that had hung in the air lifted, and I knew I was saved.